Gage,
Hey, how are you?
good. How are you? Oh,
Doing all right.
I keep on forgetting I'm supposed to. Uh, Counseling students. There we go. We're both counseling students now. We're both masters of social work students, and Gage is on the board of directors of Fountain of Comfort. And Gage is going to be going to the Symbolic World Summit this weekend. Excited?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, should be really good. Um, I at first wasn't going to go, and then opportunity kind of arose where there was actually a gap in my schedule once I got my spring semester classes, and I don't have classes on Thursdays and Fridays, so I kind of made the decision for me.
Hey, that perfect. Sounds good to me. And so you're going to the Symbolic World Conference, and we talked about a lot of stuff. Obviously, I mean, it's one of Pajot is one of the three anchors of what some people call the Jordan Peterson sphere. Some people call this little corner around Paul Vanderklay and Pajot and John Vervaeke. Um, and so, like, I also considered going for several reasons. I ended up not going, but um, there's going to be a lot of people there, at least some of whom are already familiar with Fountain of Comfort. Father Stephen DeYoung is familiar with it, and so he's one of the. So I believe one of the tracts is kind of like the Father Stephen DeYoung tract. As I was looking at the schedule,
I think so. Yeah, there's like a Universal History is one of the tracks, and I think Richard Rowland and Father Stephen DeYoung are on that track.
yeah, and I met Richard Rowland when I went
Oh,
to the conference. The They called it LoserCon. It was the it
right.
was the Lord of Spirits conference, and lots of people there recognized me from my channel, and well, not lots of people, but greater than zero people, and and I spoke to a lot of people about Fountain of Comfort, some of whom are going to be there. And since Gage is on the board of directors and he's going, we thought we should have. I mean, it's possible. I mean, you'll see if it's makes sense, but you could even stream from the conference or during the conference um, if you see that it's appropriate. Um, and obviously, when people found out that Jordan Peterson is going to be there, a lot of people messaged me and asked, "Am I going?" And because, I mean, obviously, there's a reason why we call it the Jordan Peterson sphere, right? A lot of these discussions started with Jordan Peterson, and frankly, the both of us, when I actually saw Matt Walsh's discussion with Jordan Peterson about psychotherapy before I saw your post saying, "Hey, you should watch this," and
Right.
and um, I went to post it on my server and on Fountain of Comfort, and I saw, oh, Gage already beat me to it and so we thought it might be a good. Uh, I mean, just it talks about a lot of things that we have been talking about. Um, a little bit to my surprise, Jordan Peterson spends a lot of time slamming the social workers. which
Yeah.
is understandable. But I mean, I would love to have a discussion with him about it, because
Right.
Um, I think his criticisms. So one of the things I like to say is that one of the reasons I decided to get a master's of social work was because of something Jordan Peterson said in explaining the legend of King Arthur, which was
Mm.
that the knights of the round table, each one had to enter the forest where it was darkest to him, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And that inspired me to enter the forest where I thought it was darkest to me, which
Mm.
social work kind of was that. So we thought we would have a conversation. I mean, we can discuss things before we start the video, but we can also respond. I mean, watch the video and respond to it. If people want to discuss, I mean, anybody. I'm not sure I'm gonna let just anybody onto the stream, but there is the link. If somebody feels they have valuable things to contribute, and I agree, we'll actually let them on. Especially anybody who's in the mental health field. Obviously, we would love to hear from you. But yeah, I mean, was there anything you wanted to discuss before we watched it, or anything you wanted to discuss other than watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it might be helpful to provide a little bit of context in terms of at least this conversation was obviously in the beginning of the video. Matt Walsh references a tweet that he made that sparked a lot of conversation online. But honestly, it wasn't just that tweet, even though they don't mention any of the other ones. Probably, I know, like, I even remember one in like July
Mm-hmm.
where Matt Walsh was kind of undermining aspects of the mental health field, mental health diagnosis, therapy in general. And so this has been I even at one point saw him referring to it. It was like on some Daily Wire backstage clip, and they were having a conversation about it. So in that sphere, it's been a point of conversation, and I think. I mean, obviously, in terms of the way in which he's delivered it, it's in some sense intended to be kind of provocative. Um, but from what I understand, Matt Walsh says this at the beginning of the conversation that a ton of people encouraged him to have a talk with Jordan Peterson about this,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm really glad that he did, because I think in some ways Jordan would have been maybe the only person he would have listened to, and he does for the most part do a good job of listening to Jordan. Um, but I think Matt Walsh's sentiment, I think, reflects a ton of what's going on right now in the mental health field. Um, and this is something, you referenced the bashing of social work. It's I think a huge part of understanding what social work is partially, at least in one sense, a response towards a very like isolated form of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and um, definitely has a lot. And I think part of the reason that he bashed it so much is a lot of I don't think it has to be this way, but this is at least how it is in my education, and a lot of the education I've seen is that a lot of postmodern thinking is holds up basically most of the social work theory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I think that's not as much the case for clinical psychology, which is where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I also think clinical psychology comes more from that modernist frame. And I guess where the way I'm tying this into kind of the fountain of comfort is that you see the modernist frame breaking down to the postmodern frame, and then it all just breaking down altogether. Because so seeing how and a lot of the things that are brought up are oftentimes poorly articulated means of talking about the very thing that we're trying to talk about in fountain of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but most people don't have the language to talk about it in a way, and it ends up kind of taking on a social and political flavor, which is kind of where it starts. But I think, well, as we watch the conversation, if we kind of want to go through all of it, I'm not sure, but I think Jordan does a good job because Jordan's been very much, if I'm watching his videos recently, been in a kind of a questioning the Enlightenment mood lately in a way that he hadn't done so maybe in years past. Um, Partially, I think, because of his um, closer relationship with Jonathan, actually. But um, so I think you see him kind of explaining one really point that stood out to me was how he talks about how all of the mental health is being reduced to just physical health care. And I see this as a major problem in my schooling and my stuff I'm doing in my internship, and I guess that's probably the same for you. So yeah, I mean, just
Well,
kind of wanted to open that up as an initial.
yeah, I mean, there's a ton to talk about. Oh, this is the first time we've seen a comment from X. Uh, uh, I they've recently been getting comments on X coming through.
Okay.
The So there's so much here. There really is, because the mental health field. So one thing I was very surprised about is um, there are more licensed clinical social workers in the United States than all other mental health professionals combined.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
I, unless I'm misremembering something, yeah, there are a lot of licensed clinical social workers,
Right.
and and there are a lot of people who are social workers who aren't really licensed. I have to say
No,
that as well.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a ton of work at the bachelor's level, and then there's a ton of work in policy
Hmm.
that most people who are going on the policy track or doing like community organization, they don't even ever pursue licensure because it's just kind of a waste of time and money.
And there are plenty of people who end up doing work which, frankly, I think should require some sort of licensure, and they just aren't licensed. I know in California, the state hires all kinds of social workers, right?
Hmm.
Who they're just not licensed to be social workers. At best, they have some master's degree, but oftentimes they don't. Um,
Right.
and I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that um, our society has been trying to replace the spiritual workers. Um, I mean, I just got back from my internship um, from sorry, I saw Matt's comment on his thing. Um, I I just got back from my internship with Catholic Charities, and I complain constantly that the domestic violence shelter I work at used to have 200 nuns. It has 0 nuns,
Oh,
and um, those nuns have been replaced with professional workers.
right.
Now, not only does it take 4 full-time staff members just to take up the amount of hours that a nun spends at the shelter,
Right.
right? There's no way that your 4 full-time people are going to be able to do the same things that nun did, right?
Right. Right.
Um, just as an example, right? We have childcare workers, and we don't even have spiritual people coming. We don't actually have priests and nuns coming in to do the spiritual counseling that
Mm.
needs to be done. And I think, in especially for the secular people in our society, secular has come to mean not what it used to mean, which is in that it was dealing with the things that are not necessarily religious, but those things that exclude religion.
Yes, right.
By the way, Sally is going to be at the conference, and Sally is one of, she hates when I do this, but she is one of the wisest women I've ever met. And I drove all the way to South Dakota to meet her. Yeah, and it was
Well,
worth it.
hopefully I see
Um,
you there, Sally.
and what I often say is Sally is an artist, and the artists will hopefully save us. I do believe that. Um, but back to the discussion, um, and part of what I think is really important, and part of the reason Peterson attacks social work specifically, is because there are a lot of social workers who are precisely trying to be Vervaeke's religion that's not a religion.
Yes, right. There's very much a and I've sensed this in my classes that this is not social work has taken on a there's a particular worldview that's associated with social work that is completely separate from the methodologies and the actual practical ways of conducting therapy using a social work approach. There's something that underlies it all, and I don't even know if it was technically there originally. It's hard to parse out. It's very hard to parse out kind of where it intersects. um, and I was talking to I think I mentioned to you, talking to another um, who's a psychology undergrad. He's about to finish his undergrad, Cameron Hicks, and he's debating between an MSW program and a marriage and family therapy program. And this is part of one of the things he's considering is like, well, would it benefit me at all to kind of delve into the aspects of this kind of social work pseudo religion?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, in some sense, the way it's playing out in my classes, I've found a ton of opportunities to um, make comments, um, and ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
um, that very much challenge the underlying presuppositions, but not in a way that they notice them as challenges, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because oftentimes it's just the language that they're detecting. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the ideas, because they haven't really wrestled with the ideas, a lot of people.
Yes.
And so I can say the thing using their language that is contrary to the underlying, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll agree. I will
Yeah.
say things talking about differences between men and women, but I'll do it in a way where it's clear that I'm recognizing the oppression of women in
Mm.
the way that I'm saying it, and therefore I can get away with saying anything because I've tagged it. Do you understand what I'm getting at? This is just an
I
example.
totally get what you're getting. Yes, there there are forces working in the social schools of social work, which I genuinely don't think the vast majority of my professors, much less my fellow students, have any idea. I remember when I was in undergrad at USC and graduate school, it
Mm.
was known that the School of Social Work was filled with crazy people. It really was.
Right, and I mean that's what Peterson's appealing to here.
I just knew that if somebody was getting a degree in social work, this person is somebody who has serious problems. Oftentimes, um, oftentimes So Sally, the holy fool, is calling herself a foolish artist. Um, um, Oftentimes, very emotionally dysregulated people, and the I think a real part of it is something that I didn't notice 20 years ago when I noticed that. But now, having gone through the discussions that we've been having in this little corner, I think it's because there was no theology there.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
because it was just free skating and Mark, what does he say? If you have no religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge and consent.
Right. 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 Right.
And that's what it really appears like is happening in social work. Let me allow Matt up. Hello, Matt. What are you a fellow of, Matt? You're muted yourself. I can't unmute you. We can't hear you. Sorry.
Maybe Vervaeke?
Oh, okay.
If I had to be the nerd, I guess I'd be a fellow Vervaeke. I wanted to listen in a little bit. I don't have too much. I didn't even finish the combo. I wanted
Mhm.
to make sure I got to your stream. I got about halfway, but
Yeah.
I did. I mean, the obvious one for me in the beginning was, you know, Jordan was very much pointing out how when our left brain culture can focus in on a term, just a little bit of investigation can show you how real blurry and messy those terms can be.
Yeah.
Sickness, mental illness. Here we go. And just the other thing was the comment was just I. When I saw the title of that video, I was like, "Man, this is right up Jacob's." I didn't know you were going to do a stream, but I was like, "Yeah, Jacob's going to. This is what Jacob has been explicitly putting out into the corner or into this this Peterson sphere." So
Well,
that's all I got.
I don't think it's just me. I mean, really, and that's another thing. I don't think it's just Jonathan Pajot's influence on Peterson. I think Vervaeke has also been
Yeah.
strongly
Yeah.
influencing Peterson in this way, and I'm guessing other people have as well. Sally, just join the discussion. The flattening of the world makes judgment the evil, so you can't call evil evil. Similar to in art, you are not supposed to make the traditionally beautiful, so you got to make hideous garbage dreadful. Um, so Sally went to art school and she discovered in art school that anything other than art can be called art.
Mm.
Um,
That sounds
I
about
mean,
right.
well, it really is true. Like, so I remember about 20 years ago, the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Los Angeles had a um, had an advertising program where they rented out billboards all around Los Angeles. And the billboards were just, you know how when you go to a museum, there's a sign next to the artwork that names what you're looking at and the materials are and when,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Right.
So basically, they took out billboards all around Los Angeles. And when you looked, like, you were looking at the world and it was just giving you like a title and a description of what you were looking at.
So that's the most like extreme example of what you're talking about.
I have to tell you, it was the most beautiful thing. It was the first time I'm like, contemporary art. Now I understand contemporary art. I used to go around the city looking for these billboards. Like on the 10, there was a billboard, and I'm stuck in traffic because that's what you do on the 10. And what wearing some wolf's clothing, Gage. Gross, probably effective though. Um, because that's what you do on the 10 is you get stuck in traffic, and it said Los Angeles still life, humans, cars, asphalt. It was hilarious. And I remember I was pumping gas, and some of the gas places here in Los Angeles um, have like advertisements on the gas thing. They had done one of them, and I looked down and it said Middle East dependency. I went around that entire gas station and read every single one, right? It was beautiful, and it made me actually appreciate MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and I went there. Biggest mistake in my life. So it was the most cliched gauche thing you could imagine. There was a room wallpapered in chocolate. There was pictures of nude people everywhere, most of it hideous nude people all over the place. There was an exhibit which was just so cliche. It was paper stained with the artist's bodily fluids. Blood, urine, semen, the feces. It was just I caught somebody looking at a fire hydrant, which, knowing Los Angeles housing, fire safety rules, I knew it was a required fire hydrant. And he was trying to figure out whether or not it was one of the exhibits. Like, he was just staring at it, trying to figure out whether it was one of the exhibits. And so I went to the bookstore and I asked, do you have a book of the advertisements, right? The billboard campaign. Because for me, that was the most redeeming thing about them. And the woman at the bookstore said, and I'll never forget this. Okay. Sally is not coming on because she can't be recorded right now. She understood. So she said the board of directors because so many people had been coming into the bookstore and asking if they had a book, the board of directors had considered it, and they had decided that because the intent was advertising, not purely art, it didn't qualify as art. And that was like, okay, so I totally understand that this museum is completely worthless, and obviously I've never been back, right? But there's a very similar thing going on in mental health, which is when you don't have the orienting, right? The orienting reflex of or values which tell you this is healthy, this is unhealthy, this is function, this is dysfunction, right? You end up completely unguided and all over the place. And that's what's happening in social work. That's what's happening in art, because there's no orientation. And and so yeah, this is part of. So I've been trying to formulate what the Fountain of Comfort project is, and one of the ways I have been formulating it is, mental health should not be an idol. Mental health should not be an idol. Right. And the fact is, there are people who are worshiping mental health, and there are people who want to smash it because they believe it is useless. And Matt Walsh is one of the people who sees mental health as this idol. And did you see What is a Woman?
a good amount of it. I don't know if I had watched the whole thing through, but I've seen most of the clips.
Yeah, I mean, it's not some great thing. I ended up watching it all the way through because I kind of felt like I needed to. But he went and visited a bunch of mental health professionals, and they were obviously crazy. They were obviously crazy. And so people are not um people are not actually able to relate to even physical health correctly, right? Like what is healthy tissue? What is healthy tissue in your body, and what needs to be surgically removed?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on your broad definition of general health. What is the telos of a good human and its in total complex interaction, and what that takes to thrive and flourish. I mean, yeah, these are. I mean, it just takes half a second to just unplug from that super, left brain, got to have the propositional understanding. If you can just unplug from that, just takes a second to meditate on this stuff and realize just, yeah, it's way more messy. It's way more messy. And in a
I might have to leave at any minute. I have to tell you about my Chomp Leve class, which is like, or Equerge, maybe it's, or what is it? No, I'm screwing up my terms. It's the Unskinned drawing class. The Unskinned drawing class. Let me tell you about the Unskinned drawing class. So there's a classical thing in drawing where you draw a figure without the skin. So it's like the muscles and the tendons and like all of that, which is like essential. It's essential to do that at some point when you're drawing, draw musculature. We had obese models. The only model for this class. And the teacher had us draw the muscles where it would have been fat. And then it's like, what do you do? Do you decide that you're going to be the only person that draws the fat as fat and muscles as muscles? Or do you just go along with it? And I avoided like the plague, because fuck it if the lady veteran can't avoid putting on the wolf's clothing to play their little dancey dance game. Who can? But in that class, I just humbled myself and just pulled the wolf clothing on because I couldn't handle being the only person in class that draws the fat girl's fat as fat. Well, she's being our pretty much nude model. And why would they do that to her? How messed up is that? Oh, yeah, let's bring in the obese chick for the skinless class. That'll be perfect. She wasn't a bad model. She was a great model. If you're doing like Greek classicalism, she would have been a perfect model. We had a bunch of models from the surgery kids that were completely available, completely healthy, that like were just really comfortable with nudity anyway because they're surgeons. And also it was funny practice because surgeons have to stand really still for hours, so then they could just get paid like a couple $100 to stand for art class, so that all the surgeons that were models were thrilled. They were like, this is perfect, and they would just do pose, we'd do drawings. But yeah, so we have skinless drawing where you're drawing all the musculature of an obese person, which is just obviously inaccurate, and everyone's just going along with it because that's the kind of trash we're doing now. It's just the degradation of society. That's all it is. Anyway, I had to share that one because it was just too much. It's like, that's really what art school was like 2015, 2018. Unbelievable.
Bringing this back to social work, in
Yes.
my research class, so this was supposed to be my scientific research class. So this was my hope that my teacher understood empiricism, right? For our first assignment, I used Berkeley and very, very left wing, well researched stuff to do my homework, right? And I stood up against this idea that she had of what did she even call it? Prescriptive science, normative science.
Normative science.
Normative science.
Normative deductive reasoning.
Yes. and so for the final so I was hoping to transfer, and I wanted to get an A in the class. And for the final paper, I could not bring myself to do just the bullshit in the research class, right? So what did I do? I wrote the most sarcastic paper I could write. It was obviously sarcastic to anybody who read it. And when I turned it in, I genuinely tweeted out the keywords, which was something like the key sentence. The thesis of it was, regardless of what the data I get, my job will be to make it conform to the to the scholarly consensus. That was my thesis, right? And I said, I hope she fails me. I hope she fails me. I got a perfect score, 120 out of 120 on that paper.
It's so painful. And like, what for completing art school was, I felt like I had it already paid for, because that's like, I had been in the military to get an education because my mom just desperately wanted me to have that college education. And so like, I didn't want to just like say, it's just not the same as some of the other people in art school. Like, I wasn't going needlessly in debt. I was trying to get back what I had put in already. And like, oh man, like, it was just crazy. I mean, if anything, it gave me an understanding of our current state in time. So that was cool. It gave me time to look at every Peterson thing in the world. That was cool. But just the absolute state of people is just unfreaking believable.
Well, this is what gets me. There are the Brett Weinstein type people, and Sam Harris is definitely one of these people who thinks, the humanities, anything goes, and social sciences, it's the hard sciences that we need actual people who actually are smart and understand what they're doing. And what they don't get is there's a reason why the humanities and philosophy and law, right? And theology was the queen of the sciences. Because that is the foundation upon which you can have social science and hard science. And social science is harder. It is harder than hard science. It's harder than physics.
This is why I didn't scoff. I didn't scoff too hard, or I only scoffed internally at the normative science bit, is because there is an argument when you take it all the way down. I think this is some of the JV stuff too, where that love, that value does meet reason. It's what you just said, Jacob. It's when you take this back into the classical worldview, that when all this when all this emerged and manifested, there was a proper balance and a proper nestedness in order towards the good. That would be the secular stripped version of is, what is the good in all manners of it, and is the good in how society is. Okay, well, there you get your political philosophy.
This is one of my primary things, is like, if people aren't starting with creation is good, if you don't have that Judeo-Christian instance, like, that is actually the beginning of ethics. I mean, that's why it's the beginning of the scriptures. Creation is good, life is good, people's lives are good, and we're made in the image of God. And without those things, you don't have science as we know it. You don't have it at all.
Yeah. The way I put it is I don't believe in a God you can see through a microscope or telescope. I believe in a God who belief in that God is necessary for you to open your eyes and look through a telescope or a microscope. If you don't believe that there is some, and we should go back to like therapy and theology and the discussion.
I can bring it.
I think it this is the problem. People are turning mental health into an idol, and it cannot be an idol. And I think that's what Jordan Peterson is saying, and I think that's what Matt Walsh is saying, and I think that's what we've started to agree with. My problem is a lot of people, including, for example, Ethan, want to smash the idol that psychology has become.
Back in a little bit. I think I could tie it back in. Is that it's we've grown so far away from these terms and notions, and navel gaze into this modern materialistic worldview of these definitions, that it's like what you just said, Jacob. It's it reminds me of what Hezi said. I'm thankful, therefore I am, because gratitude has been a real building block on kind of my worldview and spiritual world journey. Even when I was doing just like the street wisdom stuff, like no matter what life gave you the breath in your lungs, so that's gratitude. So the God that was able to let you look into the microscope, right? And so once you have fallen away from that abstraction of that should be the supreme, then boom, Jacob, you fall into this. Anything else you focus on is not that which cannot be said, and it becomes an idol. And so we're just running into this game over and over again. And now we're just putting on, to, like I said, tie it in, the therapy lens. It's saying, okay, when we just navel gaze into the psychology realm, there is no way you can get it right, because you have not oriented that proper to say, no, there is something beyond psychology. This cannot be the idol.
Well, that's partly why I like, as hilarious as this is. That's partly why I, in some sense, respect in one way what's going on in specifically the social work field, is because they're seeing that there is nothing of any type of religious framework behind, like you said, Jacob, all the other programs don't have that religious underpinning. And so at least the social workers, that are at least know there has to be some sort of a religious underpinning. And that's actually why I've been able to have really interesting conversations about things with social work folks that I haven't had with traditional academia folks, who are so stuck in this way of thinking. And partly what you're seeing this as like a landscape to try and explore these things, but there's no direction, because any type of perennial wisdom is considered a part of the problem. And so they have to kind of go outward into the beyond to try and find and excavate new knowledge. But they can't do that. So in some sense, they just find old perennial wisdom that they feel like is safe in some sense. So this is why sometimes you see them going to the East, as if the East is safe.
It's Vervaeke. That's what Vervaeke does.
I started noticing this when the guys were talking about the appeal to authority, and we'd be tracking, especially someone in like the really hard Sam Harris frame, where they'd be making logical argument, and then it hit like, well, it's right because it is, and everyone knows because everyone is the same and they know. And so
Turtles all the way down.
I started terming that the psychic space dragon.
Okay.
And so often, eventually, if they refuse any amount of theology, you end up with the psychic space dragon of science.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's almost
Space dragons were.
It's almost the inverse of the what is it? The flying spaghetti monster kind of thing.
It is exactly the. I mean, you see, it's populated with cats because they're on the internet. That's. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. Because it's psychic space dragons. Because they actually are appealing to authority outside themselves, but they can't say God. They can't see deities. But yeah, it always has that like the mystics knew and the shamans knew, and it's just some kind of psychic space dragon. Then.
Well, this is why I find Vervaeke so useful, is because psychology is
I mean,
precisely where he is seeing. Okay, there's no. This is where you hit the bottom, and you have to recognize. Oh, there's theology there.
Normativity. There's the world of value.
I just wish he could be like a little less traumatized by his Protestant upbringing because he's and it's just like, oh, you poor dear. Like it's just address your Protestant trauma. Like I'm addressing mine. It's hard. I know what it's like, but just
But
Well,
let's take
Gage is on the board of directors as the official Protestant on our board of directors.
oh, that's
So-
okay. I'm just a bit. I don't count. We don't know enough history to protest, so it's fine.
I personally, and I know, Jacob, you've made comments before, like you said, that Vervaeke is a useful idiot or whatever, which I don't agree with, but I understand why you're saying that. But and maybe you don't, maybe you recant those statements. I don't know. I've heard you say it before, and I was a little triggered by it. But
I use the word idiot in the same way Nassim Taleb says intellectual yet idiot, which means lacking wisdom.
like a literary device, I could understand it, but no, I think he's one of the most philosophical.
Oh, he's brilliant. He's
Yeah.
brilliant, and I love him. But he went at Chino. He said, "Jacob, I'll come on your channel," and I said, "I don't think that would be a good idea."
Well, and I
what did
think
he say to that?
I think
Because I would have to rip into him. I would.
You didn't seize the opportunity, Jacob.
I don't want to rip into him.
He needs it. It'd be good for him.
Maybe.
Just save him. Maybe. I don't know. He does look skittish, but
I recommended the video Vervaeke's bullshit to him. I don't know if he watched it.
yeah, see, I like Vervaeke,
I have not.
but like it frustrates me. It's similar to Eric Weinstein. Like I really got it. Like because I talked to him personally. Like I had wonderful conversations with him. But he's got Eric especially has this. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, but I can only think of Snoody Arrogance. That's all I can think about. Because at one point when he was on the portal doing like his little calls to action, which really helped me, by the way, which I'm actually still grateful for, because it really brought me into like, yeah, I'm gonna do stuff, and it made me really just feel like, yeah, I'm gonna do stuff.
He gave you a shout out on one of his portal episodes.
But at the same time he was doing that, he's doing this little call to action. He had students from the School of Mines in South Dakota approach him who were serious scientists, and he dismissed them because they were from the Midwest, from Podunk. They can't help him. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, it's so irritating to me. It's just so irritating to me that snootiness based on location. Like, that's just hamstringing yourself. Like, now, it would be a different thing if it really seemed like he looked into it and then found out there was nothing there. But it just, the way he came off in talking about it was just based on the location. It can't possibly be serious.
Well, okay, I don't want to go there, but I have to say part of that is if you're not in the thick of it, like if you don't go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, those places, even if you're going to very good schools,
don't also have the snootiness, Jacob.
No, it's not a question of snootiness. Sally, it's a matter of whether you are able to actually affect. You're not in the
Eve,
realm of the other people. You
No.
just aren't.
you're better.
Well, and it's the finitude predicament, right? I mean, we all have heuristics, we all have filters. We all kind, we can't pay attention to everything. I'm not saying it was right,
There is okay. We're getting way off track.
I'm not off track. This is where I want to be.
Cognitive science might be one of the pillars of our new civilization. Well,
Agreed.
what I love is if you've been listening to Vervaeke, he keeps on saying theology is going to be the most important science.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And I think honestly, the way in which Vervaeke is in many ways, for me, has been the way. First of all, there are a ton of concepts that Vervaeke brings up that I actually use with clients, and I change the language in some sense to make them more applicable, because they. And again, a lot of this is issues of language. I know it can't just be boiled down to that, but like optimal grip is a good example. Optimal grip is something that I use with my clients all the time to try and help them understand the dialectics of all these different types of things. And there's dialectic behavioral therapy, which is kind of does that to some extent, but I don't. Again, this is why, just to respond to that, cognitive science being the pillar of our new civilization, I don't know about that, maybe. But for me, there's a sense in which cognitive science comes closer to that ground you were talking about, Jacob, the ground where we hit of the theology. And that's why Vervaeke is existing in that space. And so I understand the people that get annoyed with him, especially who are religious, who feel like he's dancing around the bush or is not tackling the elephant in the room. That whatever. I don't.
That's why he's useful. I can bring him up in any of my classes, and nobody's going to attack me as some right-wing religious fanatic in Los Angeles. I mean, one of my professors, like, if he were to find out, like, thank God he doesn't believe in the internet, or I would be.
Look, let's just cut to the chase. The I'll do the perspectival thing, my lived experience. The way I came back to Christianity and my theological interest, or really diving back into, even your value in theology, was through the rigor of cognitive science. Okay, it was through finding the course of JV and still having the residue of the left brain. We're all soaking in this left brain culture, this that Ian McGilchrist will describe, where we all love our propositions, and JV will, he'll admit to it in his series. He says, at the end of the day, I am a cognitive scientist, and I am doing this series for this rigor. And so at the end of the day, the notions of like the frame problem, okay, where Hubert Dreyfus, one of the founders of, one of the philosophers at the founding of cognitive science is describing, like, hey, this is why you guys in AI are going to have problems with putting an intelligence that can recognize and navigate through complex reality, because it doesn't have a dynamical relating that it has a body that it cares about, and blah 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 blah. And this is a carpenter that can kind of just randomly synthesize this stuff off. And this is why I would also say too, is why I say cognitive science is going to be one of the pillars of it. It already is. It's humans are amateur cognitive scientists. We are synoptic wielders. We never need to go all the way, into the depths and weeds of the infinite complexities that different aspects of life can yield. But we do need to get the gist of it and get what's effective, optimal, and be able to get back to the bigger picture, right brain, Ian McGilchrist's right brain view, and get it back on with our lives. And so this notion that and so this is why I said the literary device, Jacob. I'll give you I get your point, and I think this is why he is so valuable. I think you can
He's very valuable.
Yeah, I think but one could titter and be like, oh yeah, he's a useful idiot. He'll bring people to it's like, no, you're missing the picture. He is and now this is where maybe let me call my bias out. Maybe I could get a little bit infatuated with him. There's other cognitive scientists out there. Cognitive science is big. I think he's the loudest and the most. He's exemplifying it best. He's making the most changes. But here's the other point is that where we're able to talk, where our ideas are theological, these big ideas, they're actually being able to, with cutting edge science and cutting edge studies, come with rigor and a true foundation there, to where I can come in and say, look, these are the things that the mantra of the same dynamics and processes that make me intelligent and adaptable are the same ones that go wrong and make me deceptive and self-destructive. Like that notion to get inside the mechanics and the inner cognition of what the heck I am, the true Socratic notion of know thyself. That's what cognitive science is. It is this pillar of, hey, we're on this new age. And Mark Miller said it in a JV conversation of this notion of the synthetic philosopher. And I think he's just calling out, cognitive scientists it's what we do in this corner.
But
it's
Matthew,
what James.
But Matthew, for the religious person, it becomes, for me, okay, you are exhausting me with all of these terms for, humans sin. Humans are sinful. Okay, thank you for spending years and years and years saying what I, read through the Mishnah Avot, and in half an hour I will boil down what you have claimed to have discovered with all of this study, and it's like, well, am I supposed to clap for you?
No, I get that, but it's the road back from a materialist reductionism for most
the connection point.
people.
Okay,
and that's why you say the useful aspect, because for many people it is the only viable road back. But what I'm to just
that's
kind of go back to what's going on in the social work, or kind of more the postmodern side of it. So those that are kind of possessed by the rationalist spirit, Vervaeke is more of the road back for them. Mm-hmm. Now, those who are more possessed by the postmodern spirit, I've been noticing another road back. Mm-hmm. So I have my cousin, who I went to go visit, a senior at Brown University, and she grew up in Silicon Valley, very intelligent, very classic materialist, and used to have conversations with her, or she would kind of bring them up. Because I don't know, I swear she'd never met a Christian in her life. No. But anyways, we would have these, just have conversations. She'd ask questions and stuff like that. But there was no frame of connection at all. Anyways, I haven't seen her in a few years, and visited her at Brown. And so we started talking. I was talking about my program. Anyways, just the topic kind of came up, and she has a capacity to understand what I'm talking about now. And I was like, what? Like, I would think she would have been further, but there's something happening in the postmodern breakdown in the universities that are actually allowing for a way back in, but in a very different way than the.
What's that bridge though? What is?
So I'll explain. So partially, we were talking about mental health, and she was talking about, like, before she would have, said, like, demon possession is a ridiculous thing. And she was able to say how, like, maybe schizophrenia or demon possession is what people were talking about it. And I kind of even tried to push her further, because I don't like that type of corollary approach. And so like, we talked about, like, well, what is a demon, and like really broke it down, and she was able to kind of make this connection. And what my argument to her was that, regardless of trying to draw a connection between two phenomena like schizophrenia and demon possession, phenomenologically, you see a person that you care about acting in this way that is phenomenologically, they are possessed by a foreign spirit that wishes to do them harm. And that is what you're experiencing as you interact with this person. How is that not, and this goes to your point about how you could read your Bible for 30 minutes and you've already gotten to the fact where demon possession is a better and more holistic way of encapsulating the experience of people, because it points to something that scales all the way up and all the way down. And so I asked her like what she's been taking. One of her majors is she does Spanish translation, and she takes these like classes on indigenous Latin America, and they're reading through like indigenous folk tales. And so they're reading interesting stories about like for example, just I don't even remember what it was, but like some pelican, they would kind of kill a pelican and then they would take out its heart. And if like the heart was a certain color, or they put it in some, I forget the details specifically, but that determined whether or not they weren't allowed to kill pelicans for another month or something like that. And she's speaking to this like symbolic wisdom of indigenous people. But in the classes, she's being specifically taught that this is traditional wisdom, but it's completely contrasted with like a Judeo-Christian type of thing. And so she talks about how like, the indigenous people, they saw things as a cycle. And so she talks about, she's contrasting it with the medieval hierarchy of, you have male, female, and then, the classic thing, they love showing that. And she's like, yeah, so that tradition does this. And rather they see it as everyone's the same distance apart. And it's so interesting because I'm having this conversation with her. I'm like, yeah, but from my understanding, the indigenous in many ways, obviously there's important differences, is so much closer to the You're associating the Judeo-Christian with the modernism, and
Honestly,
it's just wild to just. So, anyways, it was a really fruitful conversation, honestly.
But I mean, this is so ignorant. So for one of my social work classes, I was supposed to interview someone, and I interviewed Tayo. And the two of us sat there laughing at it was supposed to be one of these multicultural things, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a refugee in the United States. English was my third language, right? I'm not your typical white male. And Tayo, not your typical white male. And this questionnaire was just hilariously stupid, like the woke always are, because it takes a level of ignorance to be like, oh, these indigenous people, they had so much more wisdom than the Europeans. And it's like, do you realize how many people the Aztecs were sacrificing on the top of their pyramids?
To me, just real quick. I mean, I don't want to beat up on it, but it just reveals what is it? Reveals the ball, hides the ball. Well, it reveals their face. The mask slips. In my opinion, is that's what they're after. Okay, that they're after this self-hate of this tradition that they think they're born into. This narcissistic self-flagellation, and so that's anything that's Christian, European, Western. I've looked all the way through that notion of that political discourse. It's very uninteresting. It's
Right,
very sad. But though we soak in it, I will admit we soak in it.
I know. I was just going to say, but right, I agree with that. But I also think it's important to. I think very much for her, this is a way back, and obviously not right now, and who knows. But I'm just saying, so much. This is a path back, is to understand the symbolic again. And so that's what I was trying to get at, is that for some people you have to understand the cognitive science in order to, so you're kind of going from getting to the ground of material in one way to get to the theology. And then the other way is like going up into the symbolic to get to the theology. And so and to connect this back to mental health, because I think this is really important to recognize how this is all related, is mental health is an instantiation of this phenomena that's playing out everywhere in every field right now, because this is the moment this is the kairotic moment. And so why I think, though, mental health is an especially important field to be concerned about, and why I'm why I'm getting my master's in social work, is because there is going to be a resurgence in religious thinking, and that resurgence is looking like it's going to be something more like the traditionalists versus the, I don't know, non-traditionalists. And I don't want that to happen, because I don't think that is actually very good at all. I also think that's going to leave a lot of people just caught in a new culture war kind of battle that is only going to accentuate the meaning crisis, accentuate the mental health crisis. And I think this is an opportunity to bridge the gap, an opportunity to bridge the gap that does not come around often when you're talking about such a wide distance between the way in which people think. And so I think seeing the Matt Walsh and Jordan Peterson conversation was an opportunity where I could see both ways of people who are maybe critical of the mental health in the way it's kind of manifesting, and people who are very accepting of it, finding a place to sort through. And it's spaces like that, which is why I told Jacob we should do a conversation on this, because that is, in some sense, that conversation was a microcosm of partially what I think this whole space is doing, but specifically Fountain of Comfort focusing on mental health specifically and therapy specifically as an appropriate and probably a really good ground to do that, given how mental health, especially my generation, males even, shockingly, are going and getting therapy, and so there's this is the place that is viable right now, and that's
It used to be we told everyone you need to go to church. Now we tell everyone you need to go to therapy.
Right, exactly.
And everything else, and you need the $100,000 job, and you need the house, and you need you need it all. It's the having mode. You need it all. It's what Pajot said. You need all the stuff, and you'll find out with all the stuff we are still so mistaken.
Sandy.
Hey, Jacob.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm saying hi to Rabbi Malott.
Hello, Rabbi Malott.
So I'm just back from Guitar Circle. You'll be very happy to hear that I have participated in real life events that involve community today.
Yay.
I know. I do know people. I don't think he believed me for a long time. I actually know real people. Mm-hmm.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Did you watch the Jordan Peterson discussion?
Nah.
Okay.
I just hopped in to listen because. So when I hopped in, like you were just on the way back. I was listening to you and Sally Jo arguing some point, but then Trey was saying, how is Gage labeling a traditionalist? And I know you've talked before about some of the tension between mental health and everything else, but specifically religion. So Gage, you're talking about that. You're going like this, like there's going to be this connection point. There's going to be this it's going to be this place where you want these things to come together, and you're talking about an opportunity you see in the field of mental health. So I'm curious though, because every time we're on, there's this very blatant conversation about how evil mental health is because of the woke. I've hung out here for 2 years, and the first time I heard that word was in this space. And I've said to Jacob like about 1,000 times, the people I was hanging out with today are all the woke people, because they are the ones that keep me alive, because they actually, invest some time and stuff. How do you plan, or how do you expect to see some of that, what you're describing with your sister? How is that coming together? Like, what is it going to take, and what are going to be that some of those things that each side has to, what things do you have to let go of to actually meet people? We talk about ground, and to me, ground is a very important discussion point. I did take Cog Sci at university, but it was like decades ago, and it's like all I remember is it was one of 2 classes that really pushed me in how I worked with my son with some of his deafness and autism and stuff. But, aside from that, I really don't remember a billion things you guys are learning, not to mention the DSM, whatever. It's jumped on a bunch of times since then. But seriously, like, I come from today's connection points. I actually sat at the door of a community breakfast with a person who's a witch, having a conversation about Noahides. This is my life. How do you actually, like, I know how my life comes together. It's usually started with the word weird, whatever. What do you see? You're hoping for something. What do you actually see? How does this connect?
Well, I think one aspect of the connection is definitely people who can understand the value of mental health, but also understand where it has to exist in the hierarchy of being, becoming therapists. So that's that's one aspect, and that's what I'm doing, or at least trying to do, is existing in that space. Because part of the reason is because it's I think it's very, very easy for religious people to flee the spaces that the woke take over. And I don't judge that at all. I understand why, and it can be very hard to maintain your integrity in those spaces, as Jacob's last class pointed to, and he went the irony route, and he still didn't really even make his point. But I get that, but I also feel as though I've seen in my faith communities that I've been a part of, and this may not exist elsewhere, you can't make general statements about this, but this ever retreat into something that becomes so small and so irrelevant. And maybe this is more of a Protestant phenomenon. I'm sure it probably is. But I mean, I went to a Protestant. I went to a Bible college for my undergrad. Didn't enjoy it at all, and very much experienced this sense of just this admission of defeat of Christianity having any type of relevance in the broader culture, and then this attitude of kind of putting a shell around them and kind of playing this like martyr approach, which I thought was kind of silly, and just kind of isolating and kind of treating it like, yeah, we're the last, the few, the proud, kind of some sort of a mentality. And I wasn't drawn to that type of thinking at all, because I believe that the way in which this connecting point I see happening is I see the ways in which people look for God, and I see that a ton of barriers are being removed that existed before, and that people are looking for it in mental health, because that is the new religion, in many ways. And and I mean that very literally, especially in the School of Social Work, the way in which there are very specific axioms that are like I'm supposed to take in to my interaction with a client, and to assume things about them, and I think to just speak personally about the clients that I've had interactions with, the clients don't, it's very easy when you're kind of thinking about it in this kind of macro space where you're seeing these debates about mental health online and on Twitter, and then like, oh, and then there's all these woke things, and you see TikToks, and like, but when you're alone with the client in the room, that's just not relevant. And if it is, and some people, it's every now and then you get someone who's very possessed by that type of thinking, or some type of thinking in general, but that guise falls off very quickly, because it's a means of cope. It's a means of some sort of form of orientation and navigating in the world. Once that comes off, there is this very open space where I see someone looking to make meaning, looking to find God, and Jacob and I have talked about this. I'm very overwhelmed by that position, because it often feels like I'm not the appropriate person to be in that position. And this is part of the problem of the whole confusion between the priest and the therapist issue. Because, and so I have to be very intentional about how I frame that. And being in this field, I've noticed a ton of therapists love that, in this kind of dark way, where they went into this field because they want to be priests. And boy, is that a big problem.
I think that's what Peterson is talking about when he lambasts the social workers, because there are definitely social workers who are secular priests.
Right. And they want to do that, and that's why they went into the field. And they're the last people on earth who should be doing it. Absolutely. Right. Anybody who's coming in with that framing they're
priests of Satan. They are. I'm sorry, but they're priests of Satan.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, although I do feel like there is a problem in some sense, even in the position I'm in, this is the complicated of wading through the world, is that you can't have everything in some sort of ideal state. And so I know they're going to be going to therapists and opening themselves up to these priests. So I'd rather be in that position to intentionally not be a priest and try to orient them in a way that's going to help them look outside of pure mental health and all of the language of psychology as a means of a solution to their problems. And damn, it's difficult to do that, because I can't use the language that I'm familiar with as a religious person. And I can't get stuck in this idolatrous language that is a closed circle that doesn't lead to God, because it actually won't help them in the end. And so it's something like whatever's in between that, or if that, to use a spatial metaphor that I don't think even really holds here.
No, but it's very interesting, because part of the conversation that I've had at this community event twice lately has been around the fact that this person perceives structure as evil because of some of the things you're saying. It's the little bits I've gleaned so far. Frustration with structure is hierarchy. Hierarchy is evil, because if you put somebody into a position of power, you work things out, you get things going, somebody else comes into that spot and they're going, oh, well, I don't feel important here, or I want to change that. And then they throw everything, to the wind. And so we've had several conversations wherein which is why it was interesting trying to talk about Noahides, because I was trying to talk about the fact that, so I hang out in conversations with people that are Christians, Jews, Muslims, and whatever else. Oh, well, then obviously hierarchy. And I'm like, well, yes, but, and I don't know how to frame.
It's
well,
not yes, but it's yes. Everything requires a hierarchy. This is Jordan Peterson's point.
That was what I said.
Cannot be without hierarchy. Hierarchy is older than trees.
Okay, and this is what I said in the context of, you can't disbelieve in. This is a person who worked intensely, and this is a person who had a job that was all about structure. And they're saying, this is an evil place. This is an evil place.
So guess what? That's because that's because they are somebody who doesn't realize there's a difference between a corrupt hierarchy and hierarchy.
So I'm having this conversation, and I do tend to challenge people sometimes when I want to get to the place in the conversation, because what I did say in the midst of a three-way discussion was, in what you're saying to this person here, there is structure. So you cannot disbelieve in structure. You're making use of structure right now.
So this becomes the ultimate problem of the postmodernists, which is they constantly talk about everybody's right. Well, if everybody's right, everybody has whatever equal say, then why are you talking? Just shut up.
I'm not getting your reference because I just told her she was wrong.
No. I'm saying to the people who say there should be no hierarchy, right? If there should be no hierarchy, then just shut up.
I think because of the...
Okay, we're getting way off the topic here.
Okay, bring it back around. I'll sit back for a bit.
Do we actually want to do this video?
I mean, I don't think we'll be able to go through the whole thing. I mean,
I haven't seen it yet.
I wish it was time-stamped. I went back today and looked to try and see, but there's no timestamp. So, because there was certain aspects of it that I wanted to pull out.
Well, we can do it at 1.5 speed. Hopefully that'll help. But yeah, it's an hour and 26 minutes long. So I don't know. It's up to you. You're the person leading the stream.
Well, I'm gonna have to go in probably like 30 minutes. So because I'm Eastern time, so I have to. Yeah,
it's late, and you have to get up to pack. And I have to get those things ready for you.
I do just want to mention, if anyone who wasn't on in the beginning, I'm going to be at the Symbolic World Conference, and so if anybody who's been watching wants to connect with me, and we can carry on this conversation, because I think partly what I was trying to bring in as I was talking about, I think it's very easy to see how kind of the symbolism side of this space can feel like mental health is very much has nothing to do with like that there's not a strong relationship there. And as someone who is very excited to go to the Symbolic World Conference and who is is pretty involved in that community, I definitely see connections, and I think what is needed in some sense is I'm very open to religious criticism and am looking for allies, because I'm probably not the most traditionally religious person, just honestly, and so I'm going to be somewhat blindsided by concerns of people who may be more religious than me. Um, and part of that's just being a Protestant. It's the Wild West out there. Um, and so I'm very, I want to have those conversations, and I want to work through, and because I want to see how, like Sandy, to your point, like where are all these bridges being made? Because it's not just about the bridge between me and my clients. It's the bridge between me and a religious authority above me. And if all of those are not, all those bridges have to be made in order for this to work, is what I'm saying. It goes to my point about how I refuse to be these people's priests. It's incredibly irresponsible, and it's not the way the world works. So it'll just not work. So I need dialogue, obviously downward, but I also need it upward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously Father Eric, he's going to be at the conference. He has actually been very supportive of Fountain of Comfort, and that's partially because I think you were very right when you mentioned, especially Protestants, but I think a lot of people retreat from spaces where they just feel like, in all my lifetime, I'm not going to be able to actually have an impact here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially when you're looking more long term, the way Father Eric is, or Father Stephen also, then you say, you know what, maybe I'm planting a seed here that I will never see the fruits of this tree, but I'm looking at the longer term.
Right.
And I think that's part of what's important with Fountain of Comfort. I think we are. So when I talked to Paul Vanderklay very briefly about Fountain of Comfort, his reservation was, well, if that would mean that mental health is the most important thing in this little corner. And my response to him was, well, no, this is just one little thing, right? It's one part of a larger whole.
Right.
But honestly, I think it's part of the Protestant way of looking at it, which is you can't be like, oh, there's 100 people, one of them needs to be doing mental health, and one of them needs to be doing physical health, and one of them needs to be doing the plumbing, and one of them needs to be doing the gardening, right? Everybody has to be a jack of all trades because everyone has to be interchangeable.
Right.
And I think that's a real problem. Okay, you have to leave soon, and I have work I have to do. Were there specific things in the video that you wanted to respond to?
Well, I wanted to say that I think one of the things that we've forgotten about in this space, that if is to be characterized by any individual person, it's probably Jordan Peterson, which is why it's called the Jordan Peterson sphere by some people, is I think most of the people in this space that I've interacted with forget, I mean, not like literally forget, they obviously know, but forget that he's a clinician. And that's part of what I wanted to draw attention to by kind of having this stream tonight, is that, like, the thing that we're coalescing around, if it is anything or anyone, is someone who was able to do that connecting point that I'm talking about, and it absolutely revolutionized a lot of things that we are still feeling the effects of, that I think only just began. So for a clinical psychologist to do a series on the book of Genesis is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about to some extent. Now, I understand the way in which Jordan is not adherent to a particular faith. I understand the way he's not in that type of theological authority that we're talking about. I get all that, but that's not, my point being is, there is a direct relationship between direct care, mental health care, and interaction with clients in a mental health context that for Jordan scales all the way up to the way when he wrote Maps of Meaning, he was writing it from the perspective of a clinical psychologist, even though most clinical psychologists would have no idea what the hell he's talking about in that book.
Well, I think that's so. The one part in his video which I most wanted to, I mean, I would love to discuss with him directly, was when Matt Walsh said, "Okay, somebody needs therapy. How do they find a therapist?" And Jordan Peterson gave an I mean, I usually make an analogy to Marie Antoinette and Let Them Eat Cake, right? It's like, well, if you want a nutritious meal, you shouldn't go to McDonald's and you shouldn't go to conventional farming. You should get a chef to come into your home and make organic, the best organic food that's healthy, obviously, right? And that was his answer. He's like, find yourself who went a clinical psychologist, PhD, right? And there's a reason why all these other professional degrees like PsyD and MSW and MFT and LPCC and substance abuse, which isn't even a master's degree, exist, is because we need a mental health delivery system that doesn't require you to find someone who on their GREs, and that's the graduate, like somebody who scores in the 90th percentile of the graduate record exam. Like, if everybody has to find that in order to have a psychologist, right? You're basically saying, I mean, it's worse than MDs. It's pretty much MDs, right? And that was the thing that I was like, no, we have to, and that's part of Fountain of Comfort for me, is we have to find a mental health delivery system which allows us to have levels of practice, right? Some people need a surgeon, and some people need a nurse practitioner, and some people need an EMT, and some people need to go to their local gym and to talk to one of the trainers, right? And if we don't have that establishment and everyone must go to a PhD in psychology from a good research university, right? Which is what he said.
He did say that?
Yes.
Yeah, he did. And I was, my mind went exactly where yours went, Jacob, because I was like, well, let's do the math here. I mean, there is just not possibly ever
how much are
going
you
to be...
paying this person
right
per hour, right? And like, yeah, and
I get what he was saying, and he's trying to also. I think it's important to keep that in the context that he's talking to Matt Walsh, and so he's very specifically trying to point out the best way you're not going to get stuck with a woke therapist was more the way he was targeting it, even though that wasn't Matt's question. Matt's question was, how should people find a therapist? I think he was very much trying to say, well, this is how you find, this is your best bet at not finding a woke therapist. But even still, even if that's what he's saying, that's still not a very good answer for people. I mean, that's not a
terrible answer. I honestly think it's a terrible answer. And
It is,
I think
right.
part of this whole diversifying between the woke and non-woke is going to be part of the issue, because most of the people that need a therapist can't afford a therapist of that caliber. And most of the people that come and ask me, you see this thing? That's what you guys just said you want, because I participated and volunteered in mental health. I have a smack load of numbers in there from my county and the next one over. I point people to people that they could connect with in Walmart. Just talking to people. I'm not kidding. I think which is why I was pushing the thing about hierarchy. And I understand like what you're saying, Jacob. But when I say that somebody who worked in social work and for the government and for some things where their job was all about structure and all the stuff you guys are talking about, and says, I left A, my faith, and B, my job, because I can't work with the people that are just top down shoving everybody below them. I think personally in my life, I pay attention to the conversations that I have, because I tend to think God lets me walk into some of them. I mean, that's probably not a Jewish thought. Maybe it is, but it's the whack.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But at the same time, it's not provable that it is or isn't. And I'm going to go with, hey, here's a conversation that's been dropped in my lap to have. And I want to do my very best to have it with integrity. And what does that look like?
Sandy, okay. So this person had an experience where hierarchy didn't work, where hierarchy malfunctioned for them. That is the equivalent of someone coming into therapy saying, a dog bit me when I was a child. I hate dogs.
And what kind of conversation do you plan to have with that person?
If it's an individual conversation, a very different conversation than I have with large groups of people or in public, right? Because this is part of the problem we are having is, yeah, guess what? If I'm sitting across from somebody in my office and this person has XYZ bad idea, I'm not necessarily going to lecture at them or debate them. Certainly not debate them.
Debating.
But the fact is, when we come to larger issues, we have to have these debates. And that's why we end up with people like Matt Walsh. I'm not a fan of Matt Walsh. He actually doesn't know much, and which bothers me.
I agree.
The fact is, in order to speak to large amounts of things, either you have to be a Jordan Peterson, and even Jordan Peterson, oftentimes the greatest thing about him is he says he doesn't know, right? But in order to actually be the person everyone goes to for everything, you have to not personally have the knowledge. You have to be able to go into speaking to other people, right? And we've lost our capacity to trust professionals, including Jordan Peterson, right? Jordan Peterson, I would wish, would be able to say, hey, if somebody is licensed, that credential means something. And that's why actually on Fountain of Comfort, like we have our agenda. The number one thing on my agenda is that I want credentials to actually equal competence. And that's not what Jordan Peterson said. He didn't say, oh, if you go to a credentialed therapist, that person should be at least competent to do less damage than good.
You also talked just recently about the layers and levels and the intersect of all the different things. If you need a plumber, you go to a plumber. If you need it, you've talked about that umpteen times.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I know you guys are all studying like for social work and stuff. You know, like you've suggested time to go back to a social worker, and I'm like, maybe, but I'm going to talk to my friend who knew me here, this, and this. So I will take a suggestion. And unfortunately, I'm applying like a crap load of stuff that I learned for 30 years raising a deaf autistic child through a range of professionals.
But a large part of what you said to me, Sandy, was those professionals didn't know what they were doing.
Some of them didn't.
Exactly. And that's part of your mistrust.
The psychologist told me part of where I got that line from. 10% of teachers are teachers because they want to be teachers because they're actually teachers, and 90% of teachers want a good paycheck and a lesson plan to follow. That's a horrible thing.
Well, Gage can speak to this more than most people. He is a teacher. But look, that shouldn't matter if they want to be or not. It should matter whether that credential means they are capable or not.
So what I was going to say is, my friend agreed with you. And I said to her, yeah, but I don't want to go see a social worker right now. I kind of want this combination of I'm having issues with food. I think I will go and talk to the people who live on my floor who ran a restaurant and are tremendous chefs and actually do this and this and this. I want them to walk me through. How do you look after yourself preparing your food? And are you actually doing that? Which I could go to a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist for.
Well, okay. Okay, Sandy, we keep on going way off base. Gage only has 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you guys talk. I'm going to pop out because it is actually 10:02 and I start early tomorrow.
I think to Sandy's point though, just briefly, is I mean I wouldn't hold that oftentimes the best person to go to is a social worker for most things. I mean, like I don't. I want to be very clear with everything that I've said that I'm not. There is a significant part of me. I mean, I think it's very, very important to remember that the mental health field did not exist 150 years ago, and so
I would bicker with that, but go ahead.
I
think
you know what I'm saying. You know how I'm defining it to say that.
Because we think that Freud created something new, whereas I think psychology has always existed.
I agree with that. That's why I was about to transition to. I'm saying using the language that we talk about the mental health field is a new phenomena, and the way we have professionals that are just mental health professionals, strictly so, under this new thing that apparently doesn't have a hierarchy, but all things have to have a hierarchy. So, you know, there's some religious authority over them somewhere, but so no, I don't think that. And I think a lot of mental health issues are better dealt with by having meaningful relationships that are actual, authentic, genuine relationships where you don't have to pay somebody to talk to some stranger. I do think that's a little ridiculous for most things. And I think that therapy should be more directed towards, okay, how do I teach? I have this client who's experiencing these issues. Like, how do I teach them to find social connection in the world? And for like that's partly why I'm attracted to social work, is because I kind of appreciate more of the underlying presuppositions that the person is a human being in a biopsychosocial context and not just some isolated individual. And I think, although I disagree with where social work is taking that, I think there's still an opportunity to move it in a direction where we regain a sense of genuine community. And so, yeah, I just on that point, Jacob, as we just kind of close out here about the credential thing that Jordan brought up, I think that question being posed to Jordan, I mean, he said what he said. I think his real answer in some sense would be that he's stuck on that question, but he felt like he needed to say something. And I think if he really kind of wrestled with that question and really got at what maybe Matt was asking, I don't think he would have answered that way, because I think if we're to look at the way in which from the outside we've been able to kind of watch Jordan's journey as an individual, Jordan is wrestling through the very thing that we're kind of talking about, which is why I hope I can maybe talk to him about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something I was going to respond to.
Can I say something, Jacob?
Go ahead.
As you guys were talking about this, I went to school in Toronto and was part of a church that was deeply involved with the homeless. And so as a result, we had social workers, we had a medical clinic and all this stuff. And the social workers were the worst. And I had tons of friends who were social workers who were going through the schooling system. And my wife continues to work for a food bank and all this other stuff. So social workers are groups of people that I've known. I know tons of people with those degrees, and man, you couldn't more perfectly imagine a bunk degree than what people, and I wonder to what extent, like Jordan Peterson teaching in Toronto, I know people who have degrees in social work in Toronto where they did one of their classes included Indigenous studies, where it's exactly the kind of stuff that people make fun of, right? You show up to class, you smudge, which is you take the smoke and you put it over yourself. You do like a sharing circle or something like that, where they talk 20 seconds about restorative justice without any idea of how you could ever implement it in real life. Some of it was like literally just show, like my friend was like, oh, it was amazing. It was the best course. We did nothing. You show up, you listen to some Indigenous person who has no degree, who has no specialty, and they just you get to partake of a drum circle and all this other stuff.
Okay. So yes, let me address that. But so one thing, so my school has this weird thing where for my first year internship, they wouldn't allow me to do counseling. So I've been running groups.
Yeah.
And what it has absolutely convinced me of is that if you are doing individual counseling and you're not in a support group, I see no reason why someone who is having individual counseling shouldn't have a support group, at least one support group as well.
Right.
I am aware that Canada's education system appears to be far worse than the one here. And I have to say that from my experience in my Master's of Social Work, while the classes are all BS, and frankly, a lot of my substance abuse courses are also BS, really where the training comes in is in your clinical hours. And basically the classes, many of them are just filler.
Yeah.
I would attest to that, absolutely.
Well,
I've gained a ton from the clinical experience, honestly, because I was just thrown into it, and I've been able to learn, and I've been able to figure out things at the very practical level, but then also at the theoretical level, and it's been
I
great.
definitely believe this as well, is that the major thing that a degree does now is it proves that you can show up and do something for 40 hours a week. That's it. It doesn't even matter to what extent it is anything. I think Canada, like, it's interesting because Canada did pick up on a lot of these things early on, but these are things that also the highest levels, a place like Harvard, these ideas were more popular as well. Like, it may actually be that higher, more prestigious universities are worse for this stuff.
To some extent, I have to say I have seen things getting worse and worse as the higher level schools have become convinced that so affirmative action has really done a horrible thing, which is their mismatch is real. And the black students obviously bunch at the bottom because they get in
to the wrong school.
And which has led to this attempt to just flatten. I mean, USC Law School, I hate to say it, one of the reasons I ended up dropping out of USC Law School was because I couldn't flunk out. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Because it was impossible to flunk out, I could not bring myself to graduate.
Yeah.
Because it had become, the degree meant nothing, because once you got in, you graduate. Of course you're going to graduate.
This reminds me of my high school girlfriend who was so frustrated. She just kept on doing worse and worse stuff, hoping that I'd break up with her. She just, like, it took so long because I was so pathetic in high school. It took forever for her to be like, you know what? I'm breaking up with you. I should have done this a year ago. I'm real sorry.
I need to run.
I do too. Yeah, we didn't actually get to do the commentary. We might have to do it later, but hopefully Gage will get some opportunities to actually stream from the conference. That would be actually really interesting. Awesome. And we can't, like, actually, David, if you want to continue this conversation, if you have time, I don't know, I have to leave, but my general rule for Fountain of Comfort has been only I want it hosted generally by people who are doing mental health, but this seems like it's a conversation that people are finding interesting. David, do you have the time?
I can talk for another half an hour. So if Matthew, if you want to talk a little more.
So I think I am going to Sally Joe's going to meet you at the summit. So we did one thing important. I am going to go off screen, and it's all you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much. I was kind of I'm the guilty one here of I didn't even get to finish the video. I only got halfway through the conversation. There was kind of a meta theme that I kind of picked up, a meta pattern that Gage was. I don't know how much of the conversation you heard, but just I think there is in this kairotic time. Let's just say that I think there's a lot of opportunities. He was mentioning this. I think there's I think what he was trying to articulate. I mean, he's gone now and can't defend himself. But I think what he was trying to, and I would have liked to try and steel man his what he was, recapitulate what he was offering back to him, anyways.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of voices in the conversation, but that there needs to be a proper relationship from, you know, these specialized fields, these
Yeah.
professionals, to theology, to a normative system, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
a proper orienting. And I think that's correct. And I think what I was going to say was, I think there's a bunch of different areas that are feeling that, whether
Yeah.
it's Pastor Paul and what he's doing, whether it's the symbolic world and what he's doing, whether it's JV and what he's doing with, I think JV, you know, I'm the big JV nerd here. I think
Right.
he's like doing it on this very exemplificatory way of like, hey, he's the Silk Road. Like, he admitted to changing the name, right? He doesn't want it to even recognize the religion that's not a religion. He thinks the philosophical Silk Road is a more apt name, because he wants
Right.
it to be able, this connective tissue, this connective moment. It's
Yeah.
kind
I mean, one of the problems I have with that though is you can't control what it becomes. Right. So even that kind of statement, it's like, I want it to be this thing. And it kind of reminds me of TV shows that go away for a while and then they come back. And when they come back, they're terrible. It's like the person who wrote the thing, who was doing the thing, didn't actually understand what they were doing. Right.
Mhm.
Like uh, Arrested Development, the show, did not understand what it was. And so it went away, and its conception of itself was so incorrect that when it came back, it was terrible.
Yeah,
Because,
wow.
and
It's a great
it's
example.
so it's a way of, this has happened repeatedly. Sometimes it even, like something like Futurama, it's the same thing. It goes away for a while, it comes
Well,
back, it is more convinced of what it is, and as a result, it's unable to do the thing it was good at. So the religion, which is not a religion, also has to be a religion, is what I said to my friend who actually knows John.
yeah, yeah,
Because
right.
again, I know Toronto people, so that's what I told him. The
That's
religion, which is
fascinating.
not a religion, also
Well,
has to be a religion.
right. And then I think the even funnier inside joke here in this, you know, the corner of this sphere of the internet is that's what Jordan Hall came to find out, right? Is that
Mhm.
Christianity actually was the religion that was not a religion, right?
Which is
Christianity is
also a
this.
religion. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, right. It's so it's very interesting in that way. I
Yeah,
guess I would say, just because I do the JV dance here, that he's my kind of my North Star here on this, in this corner of the internet, in this sphere. I would say we 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 can't really judge it, right? We don't know where he lands. You
yeah,
know, this all could be in the journey. In two
yeah. I
years,
agree.
his project could say, hey, you know, it's not the philosophical road. It was the very long road to Damascus. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah,
So,
yeah. We'll see. We'll see what it
yeah,
looks like.
we could see.
I'm also wondering, related to these conversations that people are having, I kind of see all these things all connecting to each other all at once, where it's like the same problem repeatedly, and it almost feels like everything is the gold standard that we're talking about. And what I mean by that is, like, you switch from an actual physical thing, which has real value, which is one of the easiest metals to work with, that has simple value and all this other stuff, and then you switch it to something like paper, and then you print too much of that paper, and then it becomes worth nothing, right?
Yeah.
And
I,
then at the exact same time, you're more and more degrees are being created for a demand that wasn't even there. So the way that I think about it, my wife really likes stories like, there's a series called Christie. This woman goes out into the southern United States to teach hillbillies how to read. All right. Um, that's like the whole thing. And it's this great story, but it's so interesting because to be a teacher, all you had to do, and if I wanted to be, I could be a teacher right now on a reserve, because they have no one. And so if you can read, you can show up and become a teacher, right? They're
wow.
in such a need that's there. And so if you think about these things, what used to be required, any woman, like, who people were leading kids into reading, and they didn't have to have that far of an education at all. And then it becomes, well, we need people to have these university degrees. And if you look at the IQs of the people who leave education, they're some of the lowest in university. So you took people that didn't need to go to university, said that they had to go to university, and you didn't make them any smarter, right? You just printed more pieces of paper. And then this is part of my thoughts, which connect to other things that are all happening at once in the corner, is you take these women who used to take care of their own children, and they were told that was disrespectful, like that was bad for women. But what is honorable is if you take care of women you don't care about. If you take care of children you don't care about. So you go into a school, now that's respectable. Taking care of your own elderly, that's disrespectful. That's bad for women. You go into a hospital and you take care of elderly people that you don't care about, and now that's a good thing. Now that's honorable. And I think all these things are related. So you're creating.
There's a pattern there, I think, and I don't want to oversimplify it or misappropriate this analogy here, but the way my brain was just firing with it is there's this it's almost like, and Mark hates this, but he's not here on this meta problem. It's almost this meta pattern of the problem is that, and it sounds so simple when you daggum say it, at least for us in this corner who bathe our attention in this stuff, but it's almost where you have the harmony of the left and the right brain, right? Where you have the gestalt and the task, and then at some point you let the task get off and you've forgotten the gestalt, and it's every time what
if that is, sorry, just to connect exactly what you're saying, what if that's exactly what John Vervaeke is saying? What if he has to say essentially, no, this dollar bill has gold behind it. It's not say it's the religion, which is not a religion, is because all the religions were like all the degrees. We're like everything is paper money. It's worth nothing. It is nothing. And so
I think you're right. And I think this is something that me and Mark touched on in a prior stream, is that he handicaps himself from starting in the cognitive science left brain. There's gold behind this paper.
There's gold behind this paper.
He starts from there, and so it's almost like he has now. And I want to be fair because, like I said, I'm the nerd. He always in that stance, in that presentation, he's reminding you, hey, go participate. Remember, embody. Go. You're embedded in the culture. It's the practices. It's
Matthew. I think you came up, like we've talked in the corner, about memes that make everything else make sense. There's gold behind the paper, I think ought to be one of those memes where that's exactly what Peterson is talking about when he's saying, no, they should have a scientific background. It should be research, because that's the gold behind the paper.
But it's the meme of the left brain getting tricked to forget the gestalt. It's trying to trick you of the gestalt. It's because the gestalt is to say, no, we know where the gold is and what in the point of the gold and the good. And the left is to what did they say? It's to mistake the map for the world, right? Mm-hmm. And it's what's perfect too is I heard someone with this left brain
to mistake the paper for the gold.
Yes, right. There you go. And someone had mentioned I think I'd heard the Ian McGilchrist speech this morning at work, and he's mentioned simulacrum, and I was just like, something with that clicked and fired at me. I was just like, yes, that simulacrum is the telos of the left brain dominated world, right? It's this replication of a replication of a replication into where it's this regress into where it's the strawberry smoothie.
So I have a better one than the strawberry smoothie because it actually happened in life, and I really wish, I have no idea how to contact Wokel to explain to him that there's a better.
I love that you knew right where I went. Though.
Yeah.
There's such a distributed
better metaphor. Do you know why banana candy tastes that way?
Oh gosh, no, but I know my mom does banana pudding without banana flavoring. She only uses, but go ahead.
So but there used to be multiple, there's gala apples, there's all kinds of different kinds of, like, there's so many different kinds of apples, right? Well, there also are all kinds of bananas. And the kind of banana that they are making candy for, the banana candy flavor is for a kind of banana that's gone extinct.
I have heard this.
So-
I have heard
so-
this conundrum.
Yeah. So I think it's even worse than what Wokel is talking about, because the Wokel thing is the idea that we still have strawberries. This is even worse because the banana candy is
It's
to a kind of banana that no one has eaten. You've never
Yeah,
had it. I've never had it.
It's off into the matrix. It's literally
Yeah.
it's jumped the shark into the matrix.
It is the copy of the copy, because everyone has experience with the banana candy. No one has experience with the actual flavor of banana that is based on. There is no gold behind that paper
and so
anymore.
I think what we're saying, I think just to keep this, we're getting pretty abstract here.
Mhm.
To keep this tied neatly a little bit is that if you let the left brain slip, if you let the meta problem go ahead, and to where you allow, and this is, I actually kind of wrote a little quip about this because I'm kind of, I write stuff down. A lot of us in the corner write, but the meta problem is to think we ever had, solutions. Is that, we're here to love and care and play. Is, to think we ever had, some real, stiff, tangible having mode solution to fix it. That's the left, and so to let that slip, to think the gold is behind the paper, is this repeating pattern of, if you let that run automatically. Where's that mar that he always says? If you don't attend to that, that's where you end up. Is the simulacrum is so detached that you're off into this, into a weird non-existence that is the only existence you can have, and it's
right. Well, and there's a difficulty of, if all the money is paper, how do we get back to gold? Right? Like, I know that inflation is currently happening. I still work a job, and I'm not getting into Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin is one of those ways that people are like trying to solve these problems. And I feel like there's certain problems that you can solve and can't solve. Like, to me, some of like the home math and all that other stuff is like, people are trying to figure out, well, what about, how do we have the marriages that are actually marriages and not the marriages, like, because the marriages are also paper.
You there?
And not gold now. Oh, okay. I lost you for half a second. Are we back? Okay.
I got you.
So the relationship issues and all that stuff is essentially saying the marriages are paper, they're not gold. The degrees are paper, they're not gold. The money is paper, not gold.
This is where I think I'm just coming this. And by the way, put it on my tombstone. This is why you have to have conversations. I might be more radical. I might be more Grail country. I might be more. Yeah, I might be a little bit more out there than I thought. From my take on it, because listen, I might take my little quip more seriously in this conversation than I ever. I literally don't think. I don't think there are any solutions to that. This is where I'm at. This is let me do the lived experience thing, the perspectival thing. I think there are things that grow and die. I think there are metaphors for the organism at nearly every level. The layers of being and the hierarchy of being, and I think communities with aligned attentions can cultivate and create things. I think once you are in a civilization that has gone through its spring, to do a Spangler, its spring, summer, fall, wintering phase. I think that's what has captured me with TLC, is because there's a hint of everybody here is paying attention to the right thing. So we have an implicit community, and we're also paying attention to a certain constellation of ideas that are like community forming. Like, hey, what's the most important thing? How should we interact with each other? How should we? So what we always hit in Grail country is that it's not just the cutting edge stuff and the profound things we're talking about, but it's the manner we speak to each other. It's the care and attention we take to these conversations. It's like these things. I said something about that. I think TLC is going to affect the future. Affect a great good in the future. Like kids, my grandkids, hopefully, if I'm blessed with them, will be affected by this. And I remember Teos mentioned something like, I wouldn't want my child to be off in this corner of the internet. And I just, you know, it
Right.
stuck with me for a while because I was just like, I couldn't disagree with more. And I think, you know, it's a performative contradiction. If you're going to be embodying and acting out the values that you think are good for your, I don't know if he even has a kid, by the way, you know, and I don't want to sit here and blast Teo where he can't defend himself, but it's like, you're spending your attention and time here, brother. You know, it's like this.
Yeah.
And if you think there's worse places in there, there's much worse places you could be spending your time and attention.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's something that we're really struggling and wrestling or seriously playing with. Let's do the JV thing of, you know, like the religion that's not a religion, the philosophical Silk Road, the new
Yeah.
Reformation,
And it's interesting because it plays a role in creating less trust in the currency as well. So Jordan Peterson's lecture series on personality does something. The fact that Yale puts all of its lectures online and I can watch them, and I have for a variety of topics, means that I'm less impressed if someone says they went to Yale. I feel like, and it almost feels like zombie apocalypses, right? Is you have a can of tuna, another guy has a suitcase full of diamonds. What can I do with diamonds? I want my can of tuna. I don't care about your diamonds. I don't care about your briefcase full of money. In the zombie apocalypse, I want a can of tuna. That's what I want, right? And so part of this thing with all these degrees and how we're understanding all this stuff is that Peterson did more to break that down by just letting us watch his previous lectures. And this is actually one of the reasons why I don't like him working with the Daily Wire is I think that one of the great advancements that's occurring in this space is that it's just free and open. The meaning, like Vervaeke's meaning crisis, whatever money he gets from it, it's like it's free for us, right? And so I think Peterson has been tempted into doing something that is not the good that he could have done. I have not finished his Exodus series. I don't know if I'm going to. It got taken off YouTube before I had a chance to finish it, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not watching it.
It's all, to me, the vision I got from it is he put an unnecessary weight on his back. But I guess some of that, I mean, there's probably benefits from that side of it too, right? There's probably benefits from taking that what is that constraint, the Daily Wire constraint.
Yeah, and honestly, it's like the thing is that, so someone just made this comment, sorry, but you can't get to based without social collapse under barbarian invasion. And honestly, if you take a look at what relationships between men and women have looked like, it's like, I really like the show Mad Men, and it's fascinating to watch as a show that knows about all these conversations that we are currently having about gender roles. Because if you watch that show, you'll watch and go, oh, this is terrible. But the thing is it's terrible because it's in the city. It's where the sexual revolution has started. If you were living in the country at that time, the sexual revolution had not touched you yet. Your marriage was still stable. You weren't getting divorced. You weren't doing all this other stuff. The rich, they're having these issues that we're all now having. Like, the divorce rate of the rich has hit us now, right? And so now our marriages, like the average, I met my wife in Bible college. I know other people that met their spouses in Bible college and they're still divorced, right? How do you get, like, the issues that we're all having right now is we are living in a time with only paper money. And we are now trying to say, how do we do something where we can get to things that are gold again? And I honestly think that Peterson is jeopardizing that by going to the Daily Wire, whereas John Vervaeke is not. That's the posting it for free means that all of us can still get gold. That's still something that you can find.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, to try to do devil's advocate, I would say, I think it's probably a perennial problem. I think what we're hovering over is probably a perennial problem. And that we all wrestle with it in our own instance, and
Absolutely. Well, this is a way of thinking about it, is that the Protestant Revolution occurs because people can read the Bible for themselves. And it's just like, you can complain about all that fragmentation and we're all disassociated and everything else, that there's no single one church and how big of a problem that is. But that happened because we could read the Bible. We can't go back.
Yeah.
Like, right.
Yeah.
And so all of these
Yeah.
conversations that we're having is just like, how do we learn from this? And we can't go back to the marriages that existed in the 50s. Those were set up to fail. And the degrees were too, and all of that stuff.
Well, and I think it's the philosophical wisdom of the only way out is through, right? Now, I think there might be some mystical stuff where the only way out is all the way through, where you restart all the way at the beginning, or some weird, some weird Peugeotian, inversion or something. That's where my, non-artistic, I see, your canvas back there. That's where my non-artistic, imagistic brain kind of gets to. I know when I encountered Peugeot, the helix really came to me. The helix, for some reason, just that has stuck with me for years now, since I encountered Peugeot's work. But I think there's, because I think you could also argue there's ways that I think we could do the same thing with Vervaeke on and I'm the Vervaeke fanboy in the corner, but that like I said, there's a perennial issue of are we, because, and let's just show again, it's an exemplification of what we were talking about with JV and his series. Is we are in these embodied. Now Jesus says, through the incarnation, this is good too. This is good too, but it has to be properly oriented. But it's like we are in this paper realm, right? We are these creatures that make paper, make technology, and value systems and wield them. And so we just always have to be wrestling, always have to be keeping these tensions, these eternal tonoses, through lived experience, through the lived tradition that is the human experience, the relation. That's the book I'm reading right now, is relationality as ground, the history of being. Is that's what navigates that perennial problem, is to say, hey, this isn't the gold. This isn't the gold. Because here's what it is. My physiology fires off around the gold. It's like this thing, whatever I am, is a gold detector. That's what it is. When it's properly attuned, when I'm not screwing up, when I don't have this or I'm not sinning that way, it's like when I meet someone who's got that thing. And sometimes it doesn't fire as best as it can. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes I ride a night into an experience and meet a person or two, and have a memory that will stay for me for my whole life, and has profound, and the conversation wove to places to have deep, profound effects on my intellectual journey, and hopefully can spur character transformation. These are things that happen in a person's life. These are things that your physiology interacts with, and it reacts and dynamically relates to. It's like
I want to tell you about something terrible. One of my buddies was telling me that there's a movement online where if you're getting into like a Twitter fight, and if it's like public and it's someone that you don't know, the person will say, it's all guys having this conversation, so it's not a weird sexual thing, but they'll just say, to validate your argument, you must post a picture right now of you with your shirt off. And the idea is, if I don't want to hear anyone who can't be disciplined in their life. I don't want to hear anything if it's up here, if it's these ideas, if it's not expressing itself in your life, I don't want to hear it. Right? Yeah.
It reminds me of that Joe Rogan clip. He had the virologist on, and he goes into how like the virologist has this horrible diet, and you can tell he's like this unkept dude, and it's like, this is one of the lead, and I think that just shows you. I mean, he's just a good exemplification of this disconnect, this rift of, being obsessed with. Let's just keep the metaphor here. Let's just beat it up a little bit. Just keep on obsessing over these systems of paper,
Yeah.
these novel paper creations, and we've lost the synoptic, properly oriented gold that can be a human life. And we have a world-renowned virologist who, shirts untucked and says he drinks, this amount of soda a day. It's like, okay.
As you're saying it, it's just like, I was just like, what if, to what extent are some of these solutions just better paper? Like Bitcoin isn't gold, it's just better paper.
Well, no, and I would think the Pajot move, right? The Pajot move is to understand, yeah, we are here. We need to make these creations and use them, and use the dollar, because it's a great value system. It's a great a system of marking and holding value, and but to not worship it, not to ever not to forget the gold behind it, not to forget what it's actually supposed to represent, and how a good currency can be a good grease to a civilizational machine. It's like,
well, and I'm a religious person, and so I've had conversations. I have a lot of friends who are non-Christian, and I ask them about their understanding of marriage, because I literally am ever so slightly, like, I don't get why people are getting married who aren't religious. I really mean that, like, because it's such a religious thing for me, and culturally that's how marriages are maintained.
But you understand that. You understand in the culture that's just so backwards though now today, right? That's just it's just I understand because the traditional, and I have the historical understanding of where the sacrament comes from. But I would like to just say this, because this just comes in a very synchronistic way for me. Is it's this thing that I've been beaten in my head, is that I don't identify as a capitalist. I'll identify as a Christian who would like to perform in a capital and participate in a capitalist system. And that's the same pattern that we're beating up here for the last 20-30 minutes.
Right.
Is that people are like, you're capitalist. Like, no, I understand. That's the exact, capitalism will maximize for capital. That's by definition what it does. And that is just, again, a system of paper that could be oriented to a higher gold, a higher good.
Yeah, that is also its problem, because essentially the biggest problem. Like, I think I came in through the social work conversation. So I knew people who were on the street, and they the worst thing that could happen to them is they get their check at the end of the month. So we have people relatively sober throughout the month coming in to drop in, getting food and all that stuff. And then the checks drop and they spent all the money on cocaine. And I mean, like, I know Peterson and a bunch of other people have brought up this exact problem, is that, like, the problem of getting money, the problem of how we're trying to help, which is actually causing things to get worse. So it was like, man, if only no one helped this person, they wouldn't have overdosed on cocaine, right? Like, it's the, yeah.
I see the same pattern again, though. I mean, I don't want to sound literally like a broken record here, but I feel like it's the left brain saying, "Hey, I got a solution to this problem that the left brain created."
Right.
Instead of going back to the master, the right brain.
Oh yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Yeah, because you can give people money, but you can't tell them to spend that money on what we want. Like, that's the whole idea of food stamps. But there's like a lot of checks that people get from the government, and it's exactly that, is that we give them checks for housing, but they don't want to spend it. Like, I knew guys who hated getting government housing. They were like, these were people that wanted to live in a bank vestibule, because you don't have to. Look, if you piss on the floor of a bank vestibule, you just get up and walk away. You do that in your house, and you do that enough times, like, other people are going to complain, right? And so that just became a bigger problem. And so if you give this person their money, you give this person housing, like, you have to first convince them. I mean, this is the whole thing. You can't make someone who doesn't want to get married the way that I am, or the way that people were 100 years ago. You can't do it. So some people are still walking through these rituals, and then they're going, well, this failed me. And it's just like, no, capitalism fails you if you have bad desires. If you have bad desires, it is the worst thing imaginable for you, which is one of the reasons why certain people who are crazy or insane or unreliable were not allowed credit cards. We don't trust your desires. You don't get to, if you had a family member who was bad with their desires, it used to be that they gave their, I'm helping someone out and who was in the foster system, and he's a grown man now, but every now and then he gives me money. He gives me money just to hold on to for him, because any step to prevent him from having access to his own money will make him more responsible, because his own desires are irresponsible. So to me, it's just like capitalism hasn't failed this guy. It's capitalism illustrates the problem that this guy has. What do you do when that's how you want to spend your money?
Yeah, and I think like I said, I think I would just add on to that is that when capitalism emerged, right? It was from these Christians. In fact, it's some of my heritage, the Italian merchants and their bookkeeping is some of the earliest traces of the first inklings of capitalism. But the point is even in that is it was never supposed to do like what we're saying. It was never supposed to be the king of your desires. It was never supposed to rule your. It was always supposed to be this oriented thing that because here's the thing, you could give that person the food stamps, right? But can you instill in them maybe not even the better desires, but I'm going to go even larger on the gestalt. Can you instill in them the path to getting off of the food stamps onto the better life, the better life at large. It's like we can stay that abstract, the good life. It's like that's what we're aiming for, and that's where TLC is such a little light and shining darkness for me, because I get so kind of just I feel a little hopeless sometimes, because I'm like, that's where the culture has to be, right? This goes back to where I've realized how much radical I am. Is like this thing needs a total restart. It needs a total, small group with aligned values creating something. It's the only thing that has ever worked in human history.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing that will, because the notion that we have an understanding or even a cultural discourse on the good. Like, man, I'm in this culture. I went 25 years. I never even heard the concept. It's like, it's like I've been having to pump through all this class, thank God for audiobooks to get me to catch up on some of this reading. But it's like, our culture it's jumped the shark in many regards, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think I agree with a lot of that stuff. I think also the concept of the good, this conversation about right brain, left brain, I think the notion of putting it in, this is why the religion, which is not a religion, also has to be a religion, is you can have real life transformation through stories that don't require high IQ. Because the other thing, which Peterson bangs the drum a lot about, and for Veki, I have not heard him talk enough about, is low IQ. Highly moral, low IQ people.
PVK does.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Pete. I said PVK.
Paul, okay. Yes.
Paul has mentioned a couple stories about that scenario that you're speaking. Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is part of the whole issue, is that the philosophical realm, I like a lot of what they say, but I really, really like this idea of having religious stories that can communicate to people who
scale
that's the problem of scaling to me, is not how do we get all of the smart people to watch enough John Vervaeke videos. It's like, what if we could make a version of a story that is interesting to everyone, no matter where they're at.
Well, man, this is great now. All right, we're at a good spot here. This is an exemplification of a bunch of different threads going on in my experience in this corner. And you just brought it to explicit light. Because I think there's a both and here. Here. Because I think you just highlighted what Jacob was mentioning earlier and why he calls JV a useful, what I would say in the literary term, a useful idiot. You know, he's useful because,
Sorry. Before you say it, I think the low IQ person is essentially the body. Like when you were talking left brain, right brain, it's like one person is all left brain, one person is all right brain, one person is all manifestation in the world. Does it grow corn? Are these moves actually, do they work with women? Do they work with business? Do they work in your life? And the other is all the ideas up there. So it's the thing that bridges the two things. Sorry, continue.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's
Yeah.
that's still in line. And here I would say is that I think there's a both end, because I think yes, you need the scale. Yes, you need the mythology, and this is why I love JV, is because I think he recognizes so much of this. And he goes into detail on so much of this, exemplifies so much of this. But I think also you also need the rigor there. I think that's why Christianity hits this beautiful. It's why it's the religion that's not a religion. Is because
that's the reason why. Have you seen the video that's just someone took clips of John Vervaeke talking with Jonathan Pajot, and they just like emphasize how much John Vervaeke is gushing over him? Where it's
no,
it's a great little clip where it's just
I
like,
love them all. I love them all, by the way.
Yeah, it's almost obvious.
Even when I critique, and even I get sometimes I have a weird thing where we get on these little streams, and I have opinions and I have critiques, and it's like, and then I get off and I'm like, oh my, who the heck am I? I just critique, but this it gets into this weird. Self-reflective, navel gazing stuff. But my point with that is I think you need both the scaling of reaching the masses, reaching all the levels, but I think you also need the cutting edge rigor, because I think there's also the notion of the Jonathan Pajot wisdom of where are you standing? Where are you starting? Where are we at in this conversation? We are in the culture that is so decayed, that is so propositionally tyrannized, that is so left brain, that will only listen to somebody who has an academic, pen that says, "Hey, this is the rigorous cognitive science." And then some of them will only say, "What is the cutting edge stuff?" I was even in that arrogant category, as I was like, "Where is the cutting?" And that's where JV hits that Venn diagram of like, and this kind of even ties back into what Gage was saying earlier. Is I was going to bring this up, is that is what the cognitive science does, is that it does bring in this, you can go all the way to the bottom to where it's this embodied, phenomenological, you have to be in the right brain stance, or you can go all the way to the extended high level academic, proposition, super profound, elegant, models and discourse. And it's like, there and even now the wisdom there is to realize that the symbolism connects both of them, right? Is that you realize you're a symbolic entity, participating in a symbolic realm, and that even at the farthest extensions, you're playing with symbols. But the point of that is that there is this spectrum, and that you want to reach them all. And I think that this is why Plato lives. This is why Plato lives forever, is because Plato was able to do that. This is the inkling, is that Plato was going to just go to the simpletons. He was just going to go do plays. The simpletons for their time, right? Plays was their pinnacle of art.
Right.
But Socrates said, no. Here, come look at this left brain shit, this real sophisticated, elegant philosophy stuff, and he found a way to synthesize, and his art lives forever, right? His art scales. His art.
Do you like Werner Herzog?
I do like Herzog.
Okay, Werner Herzog has this expression where he says, "Do not avert your eyes," and he likes watching trash TV. He likes where he's just like, don't think of, like, I actually think one of the best things that could be produced, like, there are shows that my wife will say, you get 2 more stopping the show. And one of those is I absolutely love the trash television program Love is Blind.
Yeah.
I think it's profound, but not trying to be. It's not trying to make the points, but like there's little things where if you want to learn, like I want a relationship, I want a psychologist to break down play by plays like it's like football, right? Where I want them to be like, all right, now he's going to make this comment, and I want you to watch how her eyes are going to roll back. And the moment she does that, that eye rolling is a disgust sign. And that means that in 3 hours, they are going to fight. And I want like, okay, ready? Makes the comment, watch the eyes, boom, there it is. And it's like for you so that you know to
That's so
watch it
funny.
for like where it's like,
I would not even know what that show is, except for I
oh,
was
it's
just
terrible.
going
It's
through a
absolutely
small
horrible.
Well, I was just going through a small dating period where the chick, she's actually like a what is it, a genuine fan of that show, and anyway,
Yeah.
so I actually know what it's about. And you're absolutely right. It would be a great psychological endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's accidentally making great points.
Yeah. Which
okay.
I think that's about the only way Hollywood can score nowadays. Would you want to shut it down? Is it pretty late where you're at?
Yeah. It's getting later and later.
Hey, well, it was a pleasure. So hopefully I'll run into you again, man, and we could chat again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Matthew. I don't know where to share it. I'll contact you. Find me. Find me,
Okay,
Matthew.
for sure.
Find me.
Definitely. All right. God bless.
God bless. Bye. Okay, guys. Bye.